on the craggy shores of Sicily, where the turquoise waters of the Mediterranean relentlessly pounded against age-old stone walls, the Castellini estate stood as a silent testament to power and secrets. The air itself hummed with unspoken tales carried on the salty breeze that snaked through the sprawling olive groves. High on the cliff, the imposing mansion, a fortress of stone and wrought iron, cast a long, ominous shadow that stretched far down the coastal road, a constant reminder of the man who resided within. Lucy Bennett, a young woman burdened by a past she desperately sought to escape, gripped her worn suitcase tightly as the taxi pulled away, leaving her standing before the towering gates. These were not mere barriers. They were the protectors of Salvatore Castellini, a man whose name was whispered in fear throughout Italy. The scent of salt and blooming jasmine, a deceptive sweetness, filled the air as she hesitantly pressed the intercom button. Her heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic drumbeat against the silence. Salvatore Castellini's reputation was a dark legend. He was a man who controlled half of Sicily's underworld with an iron fist, yet he was powerless against the cruel fate that had befallen his only son. Stories of his ruthlessness were rampant, tales of violence and vengeance that painted him as a monster. But there were also whispers, hushed accounts of his profound grief for his lost wife and the blind child she had left behind. Whispers that had somehow reached even Lucy's quiet village nestled far from the centers of power. With an ominous groan that seemed to echo through the ages, the gates swung open, revealing a long, winding pathway lined with stately cypress trees, a verdant tunnel leading to the mansion's imposing entrance. Lucy had applied for the caretaker position out of sheer desperation, driven by the need for money to survive and the overwhelming desire to escape the crushing weight of her own painful history. Once a promising nursing student, she had lost everything in a single devastating blow. At the massive wooden doors, an elderly housekeeper named Mrs. Ritchie greeted her. Her face a roadmap of wrinkles etched by years of secrets and hard work. Her eyes, sharp and suspicious, scanned Lucy from head to toe, taking in her modest clothes and the medical reference books peeking out from her bag. "You're the new caretaker for the boy?" she asked, her voice raspy with age and unspoken judgment. The interior of the mansion was like stepping into a museum, a frozen tableau of opulence and grandeur. Priceless works of art adorned the walls, their beauty cold and impersonal. Marble floors echoed every footstep, amplifying the silence that permeated the air. The furniture, antique and exquisitely crafted, looked as though it hadn't been touched in decades, preserved more as artifacts than functional pieces. The sheer wealth on display was staggering, making Lucy's own modest upbringing seem even more distant, a forgotten memory. As she followed Mrs. Ritchie through the cavernous halls, the housekeeper spoke in hushed tones, her words laced with caution and a hint of warning. "The master rarely leaves his office except to check on the boy. Dr. Barron comes twice weekly for treatments and examinations. You are not to interfere with his work." They paused outside a heavy oak door, its presence radiating an unspoken weight. Mrs. Ritchie's voice dropped even lower, barely audible. "The previous 3 caretakers lasted less than a month. The boy's condition is challenging, and the master expects perfection in his care." Lucy steeled herself, taking a deep breath to steady her nerves as Mrs. Ritchie pushed open the door, revealing a nursery shrouded in darkness. Heavy curtains, drawn tight, blocked out all natural light, creating a tomb-like atmosphere. In the center of the room, an ornate crib stood like a gilded cage, and within it lay a small boy, no more than 2 years old, motionless beneath a mobile he couldn't see. The air was thick with the cloying scent of medication and disinfectant, a sterile, clinical smell that clashed with the expensive toys lining the shelves, toys that would never be properly seen or played with. A complex monitoring system blinked silently in the corner, recording every sound and movement in the sterile environment. From the shadows beside the crib, Salvatore Castellini emerged. His tall frame and sharp features, normally hardened by power and command, were softened only by the gentle way he touched his son's dark curls. But his eyes, when they met Lucy's, contained a coldness that made her breath catch in her throat, a chilling reminder of the man he truly was. "This is Antonio," he said, his voice surprisingly soft for a man who inspired fear throughout Sicily. "My son has been blind since shortly after his mother died giving birth to him. A cruel twist of fate that the doctors cannot explain or fix." Mrs. Ritchie handed Lucy a thick binder, its pages filled with Antonio's medical history, medication schedules, and detailed care instructions. "Memorize this tonight," she instructed, her tone leaving no room for questions or mistakes. The routine was rigid, unyielding. As Lucy cautiously approached the crib, something unexpected happened. The boy's head turned slightly toward the sound of her footsteps. His eyes, though unfocused, seemed to track her movement for just a fraction of a second before stillness returned. A fleeting moment that sparked a flicker of hope in Lucy's heart. That night, in her small quarters adjacent to the nursery, Lucy pored over Antonio's medical files, the lamplight casting long, dancing shadows across the pages. The diagnosis seemed irrefutable: congenital blindness exacerbated by neurological complications, requiring regular sedatives to prevent distressing episodes. The morning routine was precisely timed, beginning at precisely 6 a.m. with medication administered before the child even fully awoke. Lucy noticed how the small pills dissolved quickly in the warm milk, leaving behind a slightly bitter scent that made her nursing instincts prickle with unease. Dr. Barron arrived promptly at 9 a.m., his silver Mercedes purring up the driveway like a sleek, predatory cat. He carried himself with an air of effortless authority, his tailored suit impeccably pressed, his smile practiced and insincere. He barely acknowledged Lucy as he conducted his examination behind closed doors. Through the slightly ajar door, Lucy observed the doctor's movements. She noticed how he deliberately shined his pen light away from Antonio's eyes while meticulously documenting no light response in his notes. The deliberate misdirection was subtle, a professional deception that might easily be missed by someone not specifically looking for it. When Salvatore entered the room to discuss his son's progress, Dr. Barron's demeanor shifted subtly. His shoulders straightened, his voice adopting a carefully measured tone of sympathetic authority. "The treatments are maintaining stability, but I'm afraid improvement remains unlikely." That afternoon, while Antonio napped and the medication levels in his system were presumably lower, Lucy conducted her own quiet observations. She moved silently around the room, rearranging items and noting how the boy's head would occasionally turn toward louder sounds. During the evening bath, Lucy accidentally splashed water near Antonio's face, and his eyelids flickered, a reflexive response that shouldn't exist in someone with complete blindness. Her heart raced as she gently dried his face, her mind whirling with possibilities and questions. After ensuring Antonio was asleep, Lucy slipped into the adjacent monitoring room, where feeds from the nursery cameras were displayed on multiple screens. She noticed something odd. Certain times of day were missing from the archived footage, particularly during Dr. Barron's visits. The gaps were deliberate, carefully erased. Later that evening, Salvatore found her reviewing the medication list, his sudden appearance making Lucy jump. "You have questions?" he stated, rather than asked, his dark eyes studying her with an intensity that made the room feel smaller and the air thinner. "I just want to understand his condition better, to provide the best care," Lucy replied carefully, acutely aware that her suspicions, if unfounded, could cost her this job, the lifeline she desperately needed. His response to stimuli seems inconsistent with complete blindness. The subtle shift in Salvatore's expression, a fleeting flash of something between hope and fury, disappeared as quickly as it had come. "Dr. Barron has been treating my family for 20 years, he said, each word deliberate and weighted with unspoken warning. Driven by her growing suspicions, Lucy began a careful exploration of the mansion. She discovered a hidden panel in the library, concealing sophisticated surveillance equipment monitoring every room, including the doctor's private consultation area. The technology was far beyond what one would expect, suggesting a deep-seated paranoia or a significant threat. One afternoon, while Lucy was examining the nursery windows, Mrs. Ritchie caught her. The elderly housekeeper hesitated, a flicker of fear in her eyes, before whispering, "The last caretaker asked too many questions about the medications." She disappeared the next day, All her belongings were left behind. While searching for clean linens, Lucy discovered a locked cabinet in the housekeeping closet. Inside were vials identical to Antonio's medication, but labeled differently, with stark warnings about sedative effects and optical suppression compounds, information conspicuously absent from his medical charts. The following morning, Lucy accidentally spilled Antonio's medication down the sink, replacing it with simple sugar water. Within hours, the difference was remarkable. The boy's movements became more coordinated, his head turning decisively towards sounds in the room. During his bath that evening, Lucy dimmed the lights rather than keeping them off entirely, and she noticed how Antonio's pupils contracted slightly in response to the faint illumination. Her nursing training confirmed what her instincts had suspected. This child was not completely blind. Hearing Salvatore's heavy footsteps approaching down the hall, Lucy quickly restored the darkness, her pulse racing with the dangerous knowledge she now carried. She was playing a perilous game in the home of a man known for eliminating problems permanently. "He seems more alert today," Salvatore observed, his voice carrying a note of question as he studied his son's more animated movements. "Is there something different about his care routine that I should know about?" Lucy chose her words carefully, acutely aware that cameras were recording their conversation. "I've been incorporating some gentle sensory stimulation techniques I learned during my nursing studies. They can help development, even in children with visual impairments." That night, while Salvatore was meeting with his associates downstairs, Lucy slipped into his study. With practice speed, she photographed financial documents revealing monthly payments to Dr. Barron, payments far exceeding normal medical fees. The transactions were labeled Project Blackout. A hidden compartment in Salvatore's desk contained photographs of a woman who could only be Antonio's mother, alongside documents detailing the systematic dismantling of a rival family, the Morales organization, over the past 2 years. As Lucy was replacing the files, a floorboard creaked behind her. She turned to find Mrs. Ritchie watching from the doorway. Instead of raising an alarm, the elderly woman placed a finger to her lips and beckoned Lucy to follow her down a narrow servants' corridor. In a small alcove away from cameras and listening devices, Mrs. Ritchie revealed the truth. She had been Antonio's mother's personal maid before her death. Karina suspected someone was poisoning her throughout her pregnancy. She left evidence for Salvatore, but it disappeared. Dr. Barron diagnosed her with paranoid delusions. Mrs. Ritchie continued, her weathered hands trembling slightly. After she died in childbirth and the baby was diagnosed as blind, Salvatore was too broken by grief to question the convenient medical explanations. The next morning, Lucy noticed an unmarked car parked down the road from the estate, its occupants clearly conducting surveillance. She casually mentioned the unusual traffic to Salvatore, who immediately increased security while studying her with renewed intensity. During Dr. Barron's next visit, Lucy placed a hidden recording device beneath the examination table, capturing the doctor's phone conversation after Salvatore left. "The boy continues to respond to the treatment. Yes, keeping Castellini distracted with his son's condition is working perfectly." When she slipped back into the nursery that night to check on Antonio, Lucy found Salvatore standing in the darkness beside his son's crib. "Tell me," he said without turning, his voice deadly quiet. "What do you believe is happening to my child?" Lucy knew her next words might determine whether she lived or died. But Antonio's future hung in the balance. "I believe your son can see, Mr. Castellini," she said, stepping forward into the dim light. "And I believe someone has been deliberately keeping him in darkness." Salvatore's eyes darkened like storm clouds gathering over the Mediterranean as Lucy's words hung in the air between them. For a moment that stretched into eternity, Lucy thought she had miscalculated, signed her own death warrant in the house of a man who had killed for less. "Explain," he commanded, his voice barely above a whisper, yet carrying the weight of imminent violence if her answer proved unsatisfactory. Lucy reached into her pocket and produced the recording device. As Dr. Barron's damning conversation filled the room, the transformation in Salvatore was instantaneous and terrifying. Cold calculation replaced shock as he processed the betrayal from a man he had trusted with his family's care. The Morales family. he murmured, connecting threads that had been invisible until now. By morning, the Castellini estate had transformed into a fortress, armed men patrolling the grounds while Salvatore made calls from his study in multiple languages, his tone carrying deadly promise. Lucy was instructed not to leave Antonio's side under any circumstances. My wife died questioning her sanity because of that man, Salvatore revealed when he joined Lucy in the nursery hours later, his composed exterior barely containing his rage. While I grieved, they manufactured my son's condition to keep me distracted from their operations. Under Salvatore's watchful eye, Lucy gradually reduced Antonio's medication, meticulously documenting every improvement with photographs and notes that would become evidence. The boy's increasing responsiveness to visual stimuli confirmed what they now knew. His blindness was induced, not congenital. Through careful questioning, Lucy learned that the Morales organization had been systematically infiltrating Salvatore's territory during the 2 years he had been consumed with his son's care. Dr. Baron, their planted agent, had ensured Salvatore remained too preoccupied to notice. "Why did you suspect?" Salvatore asked Lucy late one night as they watched Antonio sleeping peacefully for once, his small chest rising and falling without the labored breathing the medications had caused. Others with more medical training never questioned his diagnosis. Lucy hesitated before revealing her own painful history, how her infant son had died from a misdiagnosed condition that any competent doctor should have recognized. After losing him, I completed my nursing studies to ensure no parent would suffer as I did from medical negligence. The vulnerability in her confession created an unexpected bridge between them. Salvatore reached across the space between their chairs to take her hand, a gesture both gentle and strong that acknowledged their shared understanding of profound loss and burning injustice. A search of Dr. Baron's estate, conducted quietly by Salvatore's most trusted men, uncovered hidden communications with the Morales family and detailed records of the chemical compounds used to maintain Antonio's artificial condition. Over the past 2 years, Lucy developed a careful rehabilitation program for Antonio, gradually increasing his exposure to light and visual stimulation while weaning him completely off the harmful medications. Each small victory, his first smile at seeing a colorful toy, his hands reaching for moving objects, felt miraculous. Surveillance identified 3 household staff members who had been reporting to the Morales family, including the gardener, who maintained the grounds and had access to the water supply feeding the nursery. The infiltration was more extensive than Salvatore had initially feared. "They thought they could destroy me by attacking my family," Salvatore told Lucy as they watched Antonio track a butterfly mobile Lucy had hung above his crib. "Instead, they've awakened something they cannot possibly survive." As they prepared for Dr. Baron's next scheduled visit, unaware that his betrayal had been discovered, Lucy caught a glimpse of Salvatore's phone. The messages spoke of shipment movements, security protocols, and a single line that chilled her: "Confirm cleanup team standing by." Dr. Baron arrived at his usual time, medical bag in hand and practiced smile in place, completely unaware that his patient was now off the suppressive medications. When Antonio visibly tracked his movement across the room, the doctor's facade slipped for just a fraction of a second. "He seems more responsive today," Dr. Baron noted casually, his fingers tightening almost imperceptibly around his pen as he reached for Antonio's medication chart. "Perhaps we should adjust his dosage to prevent overstimulation." Lucy stood her ground beside the crib, her body language making it clear she would not be leaving the room during this examination. "Actually, he's been showing remarkable improvement since we began the new sensory integration techniques I mentioned last week." Salvatore entered silently, closing the door behind him with deliberate care that made Dr. Baron's head snap up in alarm. "My son appears to be recovering from his blindness," Salvatore said, his tone conversational despite the deadly intent in his eyes. What followed was a masterclass in controlled interrogation. Salvatore circled the increasingly nervous doctor, presenting evidence piece by piece while Lucy documented every confession, every desperate explanation, every attempt to shift blame to the Morales family. "They approached me 2 years ago," Dr. Baron finally admitted, sweat beading on his forehead as Salvatore's patience visibly thinned. "They knew about financial problems I was hiding, gambling debts that would have destroyed my reputation and practice. The doctor's confession revealed an elaborate scheme. Karina Castellini had indeed been slowly poisoned during pregnancy. Not enough to kill her, but enough to weaken her and create complications during childbirth. Her death had been an unintended consequence of their plan. Antonio was meant to be the perfect distraction. A son with special needs requiring Salvatore's attention and resources. While the Morales family systematically targeted his business operations, the medications had kept the child docile and visually impaired, but otherwise unharmed. Lucy watched as something dangerous and primal surfaced in Salvatore's expression. His hands flexing at his sides in a way that made Dr. Barron shrink back against the wall. "Please," the doctor whimpered. "I have a family, children of my own." "As did I," Salvatore interrupted, his voice terrifyingly soft. "A wife who died questioning her own mind and a son who has spent 2 years in darkness because of you." Instead of the violent retribution Lucy expected, Salvatore simply opened the door and nodded to his waiting security team. "Take the doctor to the boathouse. Ensure he's comfortable while we verify the details of his story and the extent of his involvement." That night, as a storm rolled in from the sea and lightning illuminated the nursery in brief, brilliant flashes, Lucy found herself drawn to Salvatore as he stood watching the tempest from the window. The shared crusade to save his son had created an undeniable connection between them. "You risked everything to help Antonio," Salvatore said quietly, turning to face her with an expression she had never seen on his face before. Vulnerability beneath the strength. Gratitude tangled with something deeper and more dangerous than either should acknowledge. Lucy's response died in her throat as gunshots echoed from the direction of the boathouse, followed by the sound of vehicles approaching the main gate at high speed. Salvatore moved with practiced efficiency, locking the nursery door and retrieving a hidden weapon from a panel beside the window. "It seems the doctor managed to alert his employers," he said grimly, checking the ammunition before handing Lucy a small pistol from the same hidden compartment. "Take Antonio to the panic room behind the bookcase in my study. You'll find everything you need there." Lucy raced through the mansion with Antonio clutched tightly to her chest. The sound of gunfire and breaking glass created a terrifying soundtrack to their flight. The boy, sensing her fear, remained remarkably quiet, his small hands gripping her shirt as they navigated the darkened hallways. The study door was ajar when they reached it, stopping Lucy in her tracks as every instinct screamed of danger. A shadow moved inside the room, too small to be Salvatore, too deliberate to be a frightened staff member seeking shelter from the attack. She backed away silently, changing course toward the kitchen, where she knew a service elevator led to the wine cellar, another secure location Salvatore had mentioned during their contingency planning. Antonio's eyes widened at the flashes of light visible through the windows they passed. The kitchen was empty, but showed signs of hasty abandonment. A pot still bubbling on the stove, a knife embedded in a cutting board mid-preparation. Lucy grabbed the knife with her free hand as she punched the elevator call button, hearing footsteps approaching from the dining room. A man appeared in the doorway, not wearing the Morales family's signature navy suits, but tactical gear with no identifying markers. Professional mercenaries, not family soldiers, which meant this operation was being conducted with deniable assets to protect the Morales name. "The child doesn't need to be harmed," the man said in accented English, holding his weapon steadily trained on them. "Our employer simply requires leverage to ensure Castellini's cooperation in certain business arrangements." The elevator arrived with a soft chime that sounded impossibly loud in the tense standoff, its doors sliding open to reveal Mrs. Ritchie holding a shotgun with the steady hands of someone far more dangerous than her role as housekeeper had suggested. The mercenary fell before he could turn toward the new threat. Karina's family was in protection before she married Salvatore, Mrs. Ritchie explained as she ushered Lucy and Antonio into the elevator. "I was assigned to watch over her, a duty I failed in life, but will not abandon in death." The wine cellar had been converted into a secure bunker with reinforced walls, communication equipment, and enough supplies to last weeks if necessary. Mrs. Ritchie sealed the heavy door behind them just as an explosion rocked the mansion above, dust sifting down from the ceiling. Through the security monitors, They watched as Salvatore's men engaged the intruders in a coordinated defense that spoke of long preparation for just such an attack. Salvatore himself moved through his home like an avenging spirit, deadly and efficient in protecting what was his. Antonio, now fully alert in the crisis, stunned them both by pointing at the monitor, showing his father, and clearly saying, "Papa." His first word, emerging in this moment of chaos, confirmed what they had suspected. His cognitive development had been suppressed, but not destroyed by the medications. The battle for the Castellini estate raged for hours, the tide turning when reinforcements arrived from Salvatore's allies in neighboring territories. By dawn, the remaining attackers had been captured or driven back, leaving behind their dead and a mansion scarred by violence. When Salvatore finally reached the wine cellar, he was bloodied but unbowed, his expression transforming from grim determination to wonder as Antonio reached for him with perfect visual tracking. The boy's second word, "Papa," brought the fearsome Mafia boss to his knees in tearful astonishment. The captured mercenaries revealed under interrogation that Fernando Morales himself had ordered the assault after learning of Dr. Barron's capture. Fearing the doctor would reveal the full extent of their operation to undermine Castellini's empire while using his son as emotional leverage. In the aftermath, as workers began repairs on the damaged mansion and security protocols were enhanced, Salvatore made a decision that surprised even his closest associates. "Antonio needs specialized care to recover fully," he announced. "Care that cannot be provided while we remain under threat." Within 24 hours, Salvatore's private jet departed Sicily with Lucy, Antonio, Mrs. Ritchie, and a security detail bound for a private medical facility in Switzerland. The exclusive clinic, nestled among snow-capped mountains and pristine lakes, specialized in rehabilitation for neurological conditions. The team of specialists assembled to treat Antonio represented the best in their fields. Neurologists, ophthalmologists, and developmental therapists working together to assess the damage from 2 years of chemical suppression. Their initial prognosis was cautiously optimistic, but emphasized the critical window for intervention. The lead ophthalmologist, Dr. Keller, conducted specialized tests revealing Antonio's retinas had suffered minor scarring from the prolonged chemical exposure. She developed a custom treatment protocol involving gentle light therapy and specialized eye exercises to strengthen the damaged tissue. During the first week, Antonio experienced severe headaches as his visual system awakened from its forced dormancy. Lucy stayed by his bedside through these painful episodes, singing Sicilian lullabies she had learned from Mrs. Ritchie to comfort him through the worst moments. The clinic's security team, hand-picked veterans from Salvatore's most trusted circle, established an impenetrable perimeter around the medical facility. Their presence, while reassuring, created tension with the Swiss medical staff, unaccustomed to armed guards in their peaceful sanctuary. Each evening, Lucy documented Antonio's progress in a leather-bound journal, recording every new word, each color he could identify, and how far across the room he could track moving objects. These meticulous notes became not just medical records, but the chronicle of a miracle unfolding day by day. His visual pathways are intact, the lead neurologist explained during their first consultation, pointing to brain scans displayed on multiple monitors. The compound suppressed function rather than causing permanent damage. But we must act quickly to establish proper neural connections. While Antonio underwent his initial treatments, Salvatore remained in constant communication with his operations in Sicily, orchestrating a methodical dismantling of the Morales organization. Each day brought news of another warehouse seized, another lieutenant arrested, another financial account frozen. Lucy found herself in an unexpected role, not just Antonio's caretaker, but an essential part of his treatment team, her observations and nursing background providing valuable insights that even the specialists hadn't considered. The boy responded to her with a trust that accelerated his progress. "He recognizes colors now," Lucy told Salvatore one evening as they watched Antonio sleeping peacefully in his hospital bed. Moonlight streamed into the room, painting gentle shadows across Salvatore's face. "The doctors are astounded by Antonio's progress," Lucy heard him say. "They're amazed at how rapidly his brain is forging new neural pathways." A silent understanding passed between them as Salvatore's calloused hand sought hers, his fingers intertwining with her own, a gesture that had become their unspoken language of shared trials and triumphs. "You returned my son's sight to him," he confessed, his voice thick with an emotion he rarely allowed to surface. The fragile peace of the clinic shattered a week into their stay. The head of security, a man named Marco, burst into Salvatore's makeshift office, his face etched with urgency. "Fernando Morales has seized control of your northern territories," he reported breathlessly. "He demands your immediate return to negotiate terms." A video call confirmed the grim news. Fernando Morales, impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit that couldn't mask the cruelty glinting in his eyes, smirked from behind Salvatore's own imposing desk back in Sicily. "Your son for your empire," he purred, his voice laced with false silkiness. A simple exchange between men of business. Salvatore's response was a study in controlled fury, his face a mask that hid the storm Lucy could see brewing within. "You mistake my absence for weakness," he stated, his voice dangerously quiet. "A fatal error, common among those who won't live long enough to repeat it." After ending the call, Salvatore found himself facing an impossible dilemma. Should he return to Sicily, defend his empire, and risk jeopardizing Antonio's fragile recovery? Or remain in Switzerland, protecting his son while his life's work crumbled around him? The weight of leadership, the burden of his legacy, pressed down on him with suffocating force. "I can oversee Antonio's treatment," Lucy offered tentatively, as they discussed their options late into the night. "The doctors have trained me in the essential therapies. Mrs. Ritchie can help maintain security while you address this threat." Salvatore's reaction was immediate and fierce. He began to pace the length of their private suite like a caged predator. "Morales knows about you now, Lucy," he argued, running a frustrated hand through his dark hair. "You've become a target simply by being associated with my family." By morning, a reluctant compromise had emerged. Salvatore would return to Sicily with half of their security detail. Lucy and Antonio, meanwhile, would be moved to a different, more secure facility under assumed identities, their records meticulously falsified. The separation was a necessary evil, yet it felt like a physical wound as they said their goodbyes. "I will find you when it's safe," Salvatore promised, his forehead pressed against Lucy's in a rare moment of raw vulnerability. Then he straightened, the feared Mafia boss with a reputation for ruthless efficiency once again in command. "Keep our son in the light." As Salvatore's private jet disappeared into the clouds, Lucy held Antonio close, whispering promises of safety and reunion, prayers she desperately hoped to fulfill. The little boy watched the sky long after the plane had vanished, as if his newly restored vision could somehow keep his father within sight. Lucy and Antonio's new refuge was a secluded chateau nestled in the heart of the French countryside, owned by a former associate of Salvatore's late wife, Isabella. The sprawling estate offered both the security they desperately needed and the tranquil space required for Antonio's continuing therapies, far from prying eyes and potential danger. They quickly established a daily routine, their lives revolving entirely around Antonio's recovery. Mornings were dedicated to visual stimulation exercises, afternoons focused on language development, and evenings were devoted to physical therapy to combat the muscle weakness caused by years of medically induced lethargy. Every day brought measurable progress, each small victory meticulously documented by Lucy. News from Sicily trickled in through secure channels, cryptic updates detailing Salvatore's calculated offensive against the Morales organization. His strategy was subtle but devastating, targeting their financial infrastructure rather than resorting to the open warfare that would attract unwanted attention from law enforcement. It was a chess game played with billions of dollars and human lives as the stakes. Antonio's vocabulary expanded exponentially each day, as if he were racing to make up for lost time. "When Papa come?" became his most frequent question, always accompanied by a solemn gaze towards the horizon, as if he expected Salvatore to materialize at any moment. The chateau's caretaker, an elderly Frenchman named Gerard, a former driver for Salvatore's father, taught Antonio to play chess using a beautifully hand-carved set in the library. The boy's innate strategic thinking proved remarkably advanced for his age, a clear indication that the medications he had been subjected to had suppressed, but not damaged, his cognitive abilities. 2 months into their protective exile, Mrs. Ritchie intercepted a delivery man at the front gates whose identification didn't match their approved vendor list. A subsequent security sweep revealed sophisticated surveillance equipment cleverly concealed within the groceries. Their location had been compromised. Analysis of the surveillance devices pointed to cutting-edge technology, available only to government agencies or organizations with vast resources. More disturbingly, traces of a tracking compound were discovered in Antonio's medication, suggesting that someone on their medical team had been compromised. The emergency evacuation protocols were executed flawlessly under Mrs. Ritchie's calm, steely direction. Her years as a covert protection agent were evident in the effortless efficiency with which she dismantled their lives and erased all traces of their presence. Within hours, the chateau appeared to have been abandoned for months, not minutes. During their clandestine journey to Norway, they traveled under diplomatic cover arranged through Salvatore's extensive network of contacts. Antonio, disguised as a diplomat's grandson, and Lucy, posing as a cultural attaché, adapted to their new identities with surprising ease. The boy maintained perfect silence during border crossings, a testament to his resilience and understanding. Their Norwegian safe house had been meticulously designed by an architect who specialized in creating environments for children with sensory processing disorders. The acoustics, lighting, and spatial organization were precisely calibrated to support Antonio's developing senses, while simultaneously providing maximum security through innovative camouflage technologies. They executed their emergency relocation plan within hours, abandoning most of their possessions and traveling by unmarked van to a private airfield where a chartered plane waited to whisk them away to their third sanctuary in as many months. Antonio, by now accustomed to sudden changes, remained remarkably calm throughout the entire ordeal. Their new safe house was a stunning modernist structure built directly into a Norwegian hillside. Its floor-to-ceiling glass walls offered panoramic views of the majestic fjords, captivating Antonio's improving vision. The isolation provided security, but also fostered a growing sense of disconnect from Salvatore and the resolution they so desperately awaited. The turning point came during a fierce winter storm that knocked out power to their remote location. Huddled around the fireplace for warmth and light, Antonio, mesmerized by the dancing flames, suddenly announced with perfect clarity, "Papa is winning." The boy's statement proved prophetic when a coded communication arrived the following morning. Salvatore had orchestrated a masterful trap, using deliberately leaked information about a vulnerable shipment to lure Fernando Morales into personally overseeing the attack, a move that ultimately led to his capture. With Fernando in custody and irrefutable evidence of the Morales family's illegal operations anonymously delivered to Interpol, Salvatore had effectively neutralized the threat without directly implicating his own organization. The chess game had ended with a decisive checkmate. "It's time to come home," Salvatore's message concluded, including coordinates for their extraction and reunion. Lucy found herself unexpectedly overcome with emotion at the prospect. The months of constant danger and isolation had forged an unexpected bond between them, a connection that neither had foreseen. The journey back to Sicily felt both impossibly long and agonizingly short. Antonio's excitement grew with each mile that brought them closer to his father. His vision, now almost completely normalized, allowed him to press his face against the helicopter window as they approached the familiar coastline of his birthplace. Salvatore waited for them on the helipad, standing alone with the Mediterranean wind ruffling his hair as the aircraft descended. The moment the doors opened, Antonio broke free from Lucy's grasp, his legs, now strong from dedicated therapy, carrying him directly into his father's waiting arms. The embrace between father and son, one who had emerged from darkness to find light, the other who had walked through fire to protect what he loved, represented everything they had fought for during the long months of separation and peril. Lucy watched from a respectful distance until Salvatore extended his hand, inviting her into their circle. The Castellini estate had undergone a profound transformation during their absence. The fortress-like security remained, but now it concealed a home filled with light and laughter. Windows that had once been perpetually shuttered now stood open to the warm Sicilian sunshine. Heavy drapes had been replaced with sheer fabrics that danced in the coastal breeze. Antonio's nursery had been completely redesigned. The clinical sterility had been replaced with vibrant colors and stimulating educational toys designed to nurture his developing vision and mind. A breathtaking mural of the Mediterranean stretched across one wall, bringing the beauty of his island heritage into his daily environment. An adjacent room had been converted into a specialized therapy space, equipped with cutting-edge equipment sourced from rehabilitation centers around the world. The room featured adjustable lighting that could simulate a variety of natural environments, from the dappled sunlight of a forest to the shimmering reflections of the ocean, providing Antonio with controlled exposure to visual complexities. Salvatore had commissioned a series of beautifully illustrated children's books, subtly chronicling Antonio's recovery journey as adventure tales about a young prince awakening from an enchanted sleep. The stories, written by Lucy based on their shared experiences, were being discreetly distributed to pediatric centers treating children with similar conditions. Under Lucy's guidance, the garden had been transformed into a sensory wonderland, incorporating a winding pathway lined with plants carefully selected for their varying textures, scents, and colors. Antonio spent hours exploring this tactile paradise, often leading visiting children of Salvatore's associates on expeditions through what he proudly called his jungle of discoveries. Local artisans were engaged to create custom educational tools that combined Sicilian cultural elements with developmental exercises. Wooden puzzles featuring landmarks of the island, textured maps of the Mediterranean, and musical instruments modified for small hands became Antonio's treasured possessions, enabling him to connect with his heritage through his newly awakened senses. Dr. Barron's extensive records, secured during Salvatore's reclamation of his territories, provided crucial evidence for the prosecution of the remaining Morales associates. The doctor himself had disappeared during the initial raid on the estate. His fate a subject Salvatore refused to discuss, even with Lucy. The legal aftermath unfolded over the following months. Carefully sanitized versions of the conspiracy were presented to authorities, resulting in arrests throughout the medical establishment that had facilitated Antonio's false diagnosis and treatment. The scandal dominated headlines across Europe, all without ever mentioning the Castellini name. Antonio thrived in the restored family environment, his development accelerating at an astonishing pace, as if he were determined to reclaim the years stolen from him. By his third birthday, celebrated with a small gathering of Salvatore's most trusted inner circle, he showed no lingering effects from his ordeal, save for a profound appreciation for color and light. Lucy's position evolved from caretaker to something undefined yet essential to both father and son. She maintained her professional focus on Antonio's continuing development while finding herself increasingly involved in decisions that shaped the household and, by extension, Salvatore's personal life. "You could leave now," Salvatore observed one evening as they watched Antonio chasing fireflies in the garden. His joyful laughter carried on the warm night air. "Your nursing credentials, enhanced by your work with Antonio's recovery, would open doors at any pediatric facility in Europe." The unspoken question hung heavy between them, a rare display of uncertainty from a man accustomed to commanding rather than asking. Lucy's answer came not in words, but in the deliberate way she remained beside him, her hand finding his in what had become their private language of shared commitment. The proposal, when it finally came weeks later, reflected Salvatore's dual nature, the tender father and the powerful Don. "My son needs a mother," he began pragmatically, before a flicker of vulnerability crept into his eyes. "And I find myself unable to imagine a future without you in it." The ring he offered carried historical significance. It was not his late wife's, which would have forever haunted their beginning, but his grandmother's emerald, given in a love match that had defied family expectations and flourished despite the inherent dangers of their world. Their wedding was a quiet affair by Mafia standards, attended only by those who had proven their loyalty during the darkest days of their struggle. Mrs. Ritchie, now formally acknowledged as Antonio's godmother, wept openly as Lucy walked toward Salvatore in the estate's private chapel. Antonio, resplendent in his miniature suit and proudly bearing the role of ring-bearer, watched the ceremony with perfect visual clarity, and an emotional understanding far beyond his years. "We family now," he announced with satisfaction during the reception, his simple declaration earning approving nods from Salvatore's hardened associates. The inevitable questions about Lucy's past and the tragic loss that had initially led her to the Castellini estate found resolution through Antonio's foundation, an organization established in her first son's memory to provide specialized medical care for children from disadvantaged backgrounds. Salvatore's business operations underwent subtle but significant changes in the months following their marriage. Legitimate enterprises received greater focus and resources, while certain territories and activities were quietly divested. The transition wasn't complete or perfect, but the trajectory was unmistakable. On the night of their first anniversary, as they stood on the cliffside terrace, watching the moonlight shimmer across the Mediterranean, Salvatore reflected on their extraordinary journey. "You came to give light to a blind child," he murmured, drawing her close. "But you brought all of us out of darkness." Antonio, now speaking in complete sentences and demonstrating remarkable aptitude for both languages and mathematics, had developed a ritual of watching both sunrise and sunset each day. "I like to see the light change," he explained when asked about his habit. "It reminds me we won." Thank you all for following this story. If you're enjoying it, write in the comments where you're watching this story from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video because your support is important for me to continue.